In this parsha, we have the mitzvah of Soim Tosum Alecha Melech, to appoint a king over the Yidden. In regards to a king, that says in Shuvas HaRashba that the king is like the tzibur, like all of the Yidden, everyone's dependent on him. Tanchuma says something similar, Roish HaDoir, who Kol HaDoir, the head of the generation is the whole generation. Or as Rashi puts it, Nosi HaDoir, who Kol HaDoir, the Nosi of the generation is like the whole generation, Ki HaNosi Hu HaKoil. Now, the Rambam says something similar, but with a difference. The Rambam says, regarding a melech, Shaliboy hu leiv kol kahal Yisrael, he's the heart of the Yidden. And in this particular sikha, what the Rebbe is going to be focusing on is why is it that we're comparing the melech to the leiv rather than to the roish. The Rebbe is going to be discussing that for a nosi, the term roish could be more appropriate, and for a melech, the term leiv is more appropriate. But what the Rebbe says is as follows. The Rebbe says simply the reason we call a melech with the term leiv is because just like the whole body is dependent on the chayis, on the life force coming from the heart, in a similar way, the people are dependent on the king. As we quoted before from the Rashba, that everyone is dependent on him. But the question is, wouldn't it then be even more appropriate to say that he's considered like the Roish, the head of the Yidden, which is even greater than the heart? The Rebbe also has a look at the terms Nosi and Melech. In Torah Shebeksav, they're often referring to the same person. The Melech is sometimes referred to as the Nosi. And as we said before, in regards to the Nosi Hadoir, what did we say before? The Medrash calls him the Roish Hador, the head of the generation. And yet, as we said, the Rambam refers to the Melech as the Leiv, as the heart of Klal Yisrael, and this is what we're trying to understand. And in order to explain this, the Rebbe first has a look at a difference of how in the Lashon of Chachomim, usually use in Shas and Gemara, usually use these terms Nosi and Melech when we are speaking about two different people. And from this, we're also going to be able to apply it even in the language of the Torah when we're speaking about one and the same person. And the Rebbe says the term Melech usually means a king, the person that's physically taking care of the people, running the country and so on and so forth. Whereas the term Nosi is mainly going to be, Nosi is used for the head of the Sanhedrin, Nosi is used for the leader of Yidden in spiritual matters. And even in Halacha, the Rebbe says there's differences between a Nosi and a Melech. And some of the differences practically between what the Melech does and what the Nosi does, the Rebbe says, the Melech is the one that, the Pasuk says, Asher Yetziyim v'Asher Yeviyim. The Navi is the one that's practically taking care of the people, running the country. In fact, even when it comes to judgment, the Melech is not so involved in that. That's not his main inyan. Rather, he might have to carry out the judgment that was given by the Sanhedrin to make sure it happens. Whereas the Nasi's main idea is being part of the Sanhedrin and giving out the halacha. That's his main idea, to paskin halachis. Now, we have, of course, someone like Moshe Rabbeinu, that he was both the leader of the Sanhedrin, as well as taking care of the Yidden and all of their needs. So far we discussed one difference between the Nasi and the Melech running the country, running the people, the Nasi giving out the halacha. Another difference that Rebbe says is, when it comes to a Melech, basically the people have to provide him with everything that he wants and needs. And a Nasi, on the other hand, well, he gets a pay. He has a job taking care of the people, and he will be paid by the community, but we won't say that all of his needs, everything is provided by the people. Says the Rebbe, this idea of the way a melech is being provided by the people really represents what seems to be two opposites. On the one hand, it represents and shows the power of the king, the strength of the king. He'll get anything he wants, everything he needs from the people. But the truth of the matter is, it also shows on a certain vulnerability, a certain weakness. Whatever he wants, whatever he needs, is all dependent on the people. He needs to get everything from them, not like a regular person that's working a 9-to-5 job and he gets paid or whatever it is, and then, but by the king, everything is all dependent on the people. And really these two things are connected. Because the Melech's whole idea is to serve the people, that's his whole metzius, therefore he's also receiving everything from them. He's nothing for himself. All he's about is for the people, and everything he has is being provided by them. Says the Rebbe, now we could start understanding why the king is specifically compared to the heart. What is the difference between the heart and the brain and the head? So the Rebbe gives two differences. Number one, the heart is constantly moving, the heartbeat. There's this constant movement of the heart all the time. And as we said before, that's where the chayis is pumping the blood is pumping to the rest of the body. Whereas the moyach is standing in a very, very relaxed way, calm and relaxed. A second difference is the heart is said to be the weakest and the softest of all parts of the body. The Rebbe quotes a Zohar for this. And the Rebbe says these two ideas are really dependent on each other. The heart being the weakest, why is it the weakest of all of the limbs? Because all he's all about is just about giving chayas to the rest of the Ivarim. He's nothing for itself, for himself. And therefore he's standing in a constant movement representing all I'm doing is giving chayas to the body. But at the same time, it also shows on his weakness, on his vulnerability, that I'm nothing for myself. I'm only there for the rest of the Ivarim. Whereas the moyach, the brain, it's more removed, it's more aloof. And therefore, it is more of a metzias for itself in its own right. And that's why it's not moving the whole time. It's not like saying, I'm there the whole time for the body. And also, it doesn't have that weakness, because again, it is a strong metzias for itself. So now let's apply this to the king. Again, having these two ideas. On the one hand, he's very closely connected to the people. He's running the country. He's serving them and so on. But it also represents his weakness that everything he's going to be getting is from the people. The Rebbe says this idea we also see in the difference between seichel and midos, intellect and emotions. Intellect from the brain and emotions from the heart. The idea of seichel, intellect is you're trying to remain removed from the topic you're trying to understand. You're trying to remain completely objective, because if you're going to be subjective, if you're going to be biased in some way, you're going to be involved, you won't be able to understand the truth of the matter properly. On the other hand, the idea of midos is how I feel towards the thing. I need to have a certain relationship with it, I'm close to it, I need to consider it, and how is it good for me or not good for me, and so on. And therefore, again, we have these two differences. On the one hand, midos are in this constant movement and excitement and so on and so forth, whereas seichel is very calm and relaxed. The second difference is that midos are much weaker metzias in the sense they could easily change, or very possible to change. Today I feel one way, tomorrow I feel differently. Whereas seichel, once I came to understand the emes of something, it's remaining permanent in that way. Says the Rebbe, now let's apply all of this to the melech aspect and to the nasi aspect. The melech aspect, similar to the heart, is the one that's very, very much involved with the people. He's running, he's taking care of all their needs. Like the heart, taking care of the needs and pumping blood, giving chayas to all of the Ivarim. But its thing, the thing of the leiv, just like the thing of the melech, is not about giving the psak din, not about deciding the halacha. What about the nasi? The nasi, similar to the brain, similar to the head, its idea is more like being the brain of the generation, the roish of the generation, to give out the halachas, the psak din of Torah, to all of the people. And this is why we say, the melech, we said, he is like the leiv. The nasi, we're more comparing to the roish, and we say, ha-nasi hu ha-koil. Because everything is receiving from the heart, in fact, from the brain, in fact, even the heart. And this represents the idea that even the melech, what's he doing? He's carrying out the verdict. He's carrying out the judgment of that which the mind, which the brain understood is the right Torah of the Torah, which Torah had pasken, and now he's going to do this. And in fact, the melech has to show respect even to the Talmidei Chachamim and so on and so forth. This is all the general difference between the melech and the nasi. Sometimes, again, it could be in the same person, and the roish and the leiv. The Rebbe says, by someone like Moshe Rabbeinu, we had both of these ideas together. We learn out the concept of Anosi U'Akol from Moshe Rabbeinu, but he also had the idea of a leiv. On the one hand, Moshe Rabbeinu was a melech, and that's similar to the heart. We say, the pasuk by Yehi Bishur and melech, referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he took care of all the gashmi needs and all the spiritual needs, everything of the people. That's more like the heart of the Yidden, but at the same time, he was also the head of the Sanhedrin, and he's the one that teaches Yidden Torah, and in that way, he's the head, and the moyach, the brain of the Yidden. Concludes the Rebbe the same thing we find regarding Mashiach as well, that Mashiach also has these two in Yonam. On the one hand, he is Melech HaMashiach, and in the most perfect way of Malchus. On the other hand, he's also considered a Rav. He's going to be teaching Torah to all of the Yidden.